let's dive into the real story of today and the last couple of days, and that is this guy, Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is the senator from Louisiana, I think. I could be totally wrong with that. That is something I should definitely know. I think that is true, though. Let me see that, actually. Lindsey Graham, U.S. Senator. He is from South Carolina. South Carolina. My mistake. What's up? See you guys in chat. Getting it going. Yes, we're booing these guys because Lindsey Graham is proposing a national abortion ban. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat and says, actually, Connor, that's not a full abortion ban. It's just a 15-week abortion ban. In practicality, in reality, if you want to talk about the world that we are living in the United States, a 15-week abortion ban mandated by the federal government, if this was to be passed, is a functional all-out abortion ban. Yes, and Lauren, I realized that I had a big brain fart. Didn't remember that he was from South Carolina. But Lindsey Graham, the guy is, and look, I'm saying this as a single dude. The guy is not married. He does not have kids. He has never had this sort of relationship where he has been around women that may have to make these choices. He doesn't care. So the functional 15-week abortion ban is being proposed nationally, not just in South Carolina, not just in Alabama, not just in Texas, but a federal ban. With the exceptions, of course, only for the life of the mother, which is, of course, subjective, to be determined by doctors, which then are held personally and criminally liable to the standard of what this bill proposes, which we will come back to that in a second. The exceptions of rape and incest are irrelevant, because if you are telling a doctor or you are trying to get an abortion because you need one, because you were raped, how are you supposed to prove in the court of law that you have been raped within that time period? If you have to try and prove this in a court of law, or even in the court of common, in the court of public opinion, which doesn't count for anything really, but if that was the case, you still would have a hard time doing it in that amount of time. Because most women that get pregnant don't know that they're pregnant right off the bat, especially if it's unintended. And then they have to find the resources, which now are dwindling. They have to find the resources to healthcare providers, which now are dwindling in numbers. There's healthcare providers that are leaving the industry. There are nurses that are leaving the industry. There are nurses that are underpaid, underprivileged, and going on strike, by the way. All of this is to say that this guy, Lindsey Graham, does not get it. He does not care about the forced birth that he is going to be, and frankly, the forced birth and possibly the the outcome, which would lead to the death of thousands of women across the country over a period of time. It's not going to happen immediately, but we have seen just since the Dobbs decision that dozens and dozens of cases where women have had to go to the hospital because of stillborn babies being left inside of them because they can't be properly taken care of. You have miscarriages that are not being taken seriously. You have people that have actual life-threatening illnesses from this stuff that are not given what the services and the health care that they need. You see Planned Parenthood having to step up this big game while all these other providers are just leaving certain places. There are states where there are 1 or 0 abortion providers in the state. And this is the logical conclusion of where we talk about abortion bans leading to. Because remember, the original point of the Dobbs case is to say that these decisions around the issue of abortion and around the protections around your bodily autonomy, which are going to be under threat under multiple other issues, whether it be contraception or the right to marry who you love, these rights, according to the Republicans and the conservatives on the Supreme Court, should be solely left to the machinations of your state, not the United States government. However, when they get their win, when that box is checked, they get rid of the federal protections for abortion. Now they're going to jump to federally banning abortion because the principles of federalism, which we will also discuss here in a second, have been disregarded and utilized and wielded to whittle down the federal government's power to make progress in order to regress us to the 1940s style of misogyny that these people want, the 1950s style of misogyny. And before that, obviously, we're talking about these people want to control other people's bodies. So a 15-week abortion ban might not seem like, oh, this is a whole thing of, yeah, this is not a full-out abortion ban. And it's also important to note, I read in an article this morning just to make sure too, there are a few European nations that are utilized as a counter narrative to this being a big issue, where I believe it is France, Germany, have 15-week abortion bans. And let me tell you this, they're not the same. When you look at the comparison of American society to the European model in this scenario, the Republican Party is so far right that the conservative parties in these other countries look like the Democratic Party. And in fact, some of them are to the left of the Democratic Party. The 15-week abortion bans within those nations have much more exceptions than this proposal would. The 15-week proposal, or the 15-week laws there, allow for the woman to decide whether there is mental, physical, socioeconomic impact that would cause them to have just cause to have an abortion post 15 weeks. This bill is up to the physician. And here, I'll get rid of this ugly mug off the screen here for a second. Just leave this ugly mug there. And when you talk about the issue of the physician having to decide, and we've talked about this a little bit, but if you're a physician, let's just take someone in chat, right? If you listen to this right now, are a physician in a hospital that receives federal or state funding, which most of them do, are you going to risk your license, your funding to provide abortions for a potentially questionable whether the life of the mother is in danger? Because how do you determine this? Let's use video game analogy. People don't have health bars over their heads. people aren't like losing damage and you can like see it from them. Sometimes you can have internal bleeding and you wouldn't know that without going to the doctor and having these procedures done. If you have to, jump to the extreme of saying, the life of the mother has to be in danger, but it's only up to the physician. And if the physician is potentially interpreted to be wrong, they could be criminally and civilly punished. For those who don't know the difference, civil court would mean like fines. They would be able to sue for personal damages, versus criminal, which technically could also be fines, but would also possibly bring on jail or prison time. The interpretation of these laws, which is frankly, this is what's happening across the country now in states that don't have more liberal abortion laws. Pennsylvania being one that has more of the liberal abortion laws because we have Governor Tom Wolf. Now, again, I will bring this up as much as I possibly can. Vote for Josh Shapiro and vote for John Fetterman, because these are the two politicians that will make a difference in the long term. The governor of Pennsylvania is the stalwart holding women's reproductive rights up against a radical right wing in this state. So just so we know, again, you're a doctor and you make a potentially interpretive wrong, again, this is very subjective, wrong decision in certain states, and again, because we don't know how this federal law would have been implemented, in certain states, you could go to prison as the doctor. Now, these people want to say, we don't want to throw women in jail. We don't want to throw the mother in jail. But mark it down right now. It's only a matter of time before that starts happening. Or actually, I've already heard stories of it happening to certain people in certain states. Now, those are anecdotes. Those are one-offs. What can we make of those? Well, as time goes on in these states like Texas and Florida and all these other places that are moving further and further right-wing, you will see the number of these incidents going up. We can get real data from them. But if we just sit and let this happen, we're really just living in a dystopia. I mean, it's apropos that on the side, I think someone mentioned it in chat, on the side of that CNN ad is a Handmaid's Tale, like an advertisement. I'll show you again. Right here we have literally a Handmaid's Tale, which I'm not advertising for Hulu, but I can't get all these ads off these freaking articles. But we have that on there, which is super, super apropos of what we're living through right now. And before I go into the electoral implications of this, let me just talk about federalism, because federalism is a bit of a pet project for me, something that really does matter to me. Quick story time for anybody that is not aware of, past shows or past writings or whatever. The first book that I ever chose to read for fun, post high school, was Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on the last one. John, it's not doesn't really matter. It's the Federalist Papers. And I should really remember all three of them. But Alexander Hamilton being the one that wrote like 80% of all the Federalist Papers, right? Federalist Papers were an argument in favor of, at the time, a radical notion: the formation of a federal government in the United States, a loose federal government that held up the rights of all the individuals underneath them. This federal government at that time was quite literally, because remember the time period we're talking about, revolutionary. Democracy, representative republics at that time were revolutionary. And you have Hamilton, you have Madison writing about this. And they are advocating for a stronger unity of the states. It's funny. I was reading for school for a school project. I had to read a part of Rahm Emanuel's book, and he was talking about I'm not a fan of Rahm Emanuel's, but he was talking about the trade between major cities and how this was like a new thing where it's not between countries, but between two major cities in different countries. But let's rewind this idea of federalism, where before 1781, let's just say, there was no law that said each state cannot have tariffs against each other. States that have that trade between each other, between New York and New Jersey, cannot have tariffs against each other, hurting one economy in favor of the other. But once we formed this union, it got rid of that. It said, okay, we're a country, not a state. We're a formation, a United States, but we are not individual states where it's just the Wild West didn't exist at that point, but you understand what I'm saying. When you look at this and you apply it to today's world, and you are saying, okay, federalism can work where you have some decisions that are left to the state, some decisions that are left to the local municipal governments, and some that have to be federally mandated. You could argue that, okay, maybe the original reasoning for federalism, meaning that diversification between the states and the federal government, was that the states would provide incubators for new ideas, for better potentially ideas, and test them out. So you say, we want to try Medicare for all. We're going to try Medicare for all in California. And if California works, maybe we extrapolate it and bring it to the entire country. Now, we know that doesn't exactly work nowadays. The federal government doesn't exactly love to take progressive values and extrapolate them to the rest of the world, or the rest of the country, I'm sorry. But the Republican Party most certainly does, because the Republican Party is using it to dismantle the federal government, to dismantle governorships, to dismantle state governments and all this stuff, and strip it down to the lowest level, because the administrative state is their enemy. The administrative state is the one that will put up roadblocks to, say, oil and gas companies and say, you need to have this amount of clean energy systems. You need to stop polluting. You need to do this, that, the other thing. The government's the one that says car manufacturers have to have their emissions at this level. The list goes on and on. Your water has to be X amount clean. You can't have any of this lead in it, etc. Right? So their goal is to disrupt and dismantle it on a federal level. They use, let's just say, Wisconsin, because if you don't know what happened to Wisconsin, go look that up, read about that. Scott Walker in Wisconsin was used to dismantle the administrative state in Wisconsin, and now it is being extrapolated to the federal government, which again also could be rewinded before Scott Walker to George Bush, and then take one more step to Ronald Reagan. The administrative state has been at public enemy number one since Ronald Reagan. You can even include Richard Nixon in that. And because of this, abortion rights are one of the things that have been caught in the sights of these right-wingers. They don't believe that you should have a federal right to an abortion. They don't even believe that you have the federal right to privacy. They think that is made up concept. Now, I've had this argument before, and it's interesting to see, but remember that when something is based on precedent set by the Supreme Court, that does create a federal right to something. If you have, like currently, we have a federal right for gay marriage to exist. Just because it's not written as you have the right to get gay married. I mean, like, I don't know how explicit you could put it, but that's not going to be in the Constitution written like that. But the interpretation of federal common law is how that's applied. You create rights through that precedent. They undermine this. They don't care about this. They kick it down to the states when it's convenient to them, but they bring it back up to the federal government even when it's more convenient to them. So the concept of a federalism has been bastardized by these far-right judges, these far-right senators and congresspeople and governors. Because you take someone like DeSantis is trying to centralize government in his hands. He's trying to strip it down from the federal government, down to Florida, and say, hey, this is what we want to do in Florida. Because, of course, he's trying to run for president. It's all about control. It's all about domination. And it's baked in misogyny. The one thing, and I saw it in chat, was, will this backfire? This is very unpopular. This has to be unpopular. Will this backfire on the Republicans? And that is my theory. My theory, and again, it's not like I am living in a vacuum and I haven't discussed this or heard this from anybody, but my theory is that it will backfire because the constant, let's just ask ourselves, and you could throw it in chat before I maybe answer the question myself, because it's a bit of a rhetorical question I'm asking. But why in September of 2022, before one of the biggest midterm elections in our lifetimes, would the senator from South Carolina, see, I remember this time, propose a federal ban on abortion? Why would they do that? It is because this ban, and this is my opinion, this ban was supposed to be the compromise. This ban was supposed to be the one that they could get Joe Manchin to support, or they could get a few Democrats to be like, you know what? Okay, 15 weeks is not that bad. Because, of course, remember, the original precedent set forth by Roe versus Wade, and actually it's really Casey versus Planned Parenthood that set the 24-week precedent. It was 24 weeks. I mean, I kind of just messed that up, but it was 24 weeks was the precedent. That was the cutoff. And then there were exceptions to that, of course. So if you shave that down to 24 to 15... but really, the Republicans don't want any abortion to be available. They want to control and have forced births. Then, and of course, that's not even true for most Republican voters. Let's remember that. Most Republican voters don't believe that. Most Republican voters actually support abortion in some cases. There's a lot of Republicans that support it in the same cases that Democrats do. The overwhelming majority of voters actually supports abortion rights. So remember that. But this, in theory, was supposed to be the olive branch. This was supposed to be the, hey guys, we might not agree on the total outcome, but we can at least agree to this. And Lindsey Graham didn't read the room. Because luckily for us, and I think this is important, is because a 15-week federal abortion ban is way more restrictive than a lot of states, especially blue states, have. That creates the, why are you, like, you are amplifying the people that, and I'm okay with this because it's not going to pass, right? But he is amplifying and projecting out to this thing, to all the voters, saying, hey, this is what, when we get the Senate, this is what we're going to do. And frankly, if they get the Senate, it's going to be a lot worse than 15 weeks ban. It's going to be earlier than that. But he's projecting and saying, hey, we're going to do this. And it's going to fire up people in New York, New Jersey, California, all these places that are just going to boost up Democratic turnout. But what's more important is in those purple states. In the purple states like Pennsylvania and Virginia, and I mean, you can run down the list. I don't think Maine is technically. I don't even know if there's an election there. In Arizona, though, you have Ohio, Georgia. these are the states where you're going to see increased Democratic turnout because of a frankly stupid decision by a Republican senator to focus on the issue that is turning out women and is turning out Democrats. It is clear what they're trying to do. Now, I point that out. I think that Democrats should run on this issue. I mean, I was analyzing you may start to see a lot of Democratic political ads and frankly Republican political ads as well. But if you're a Democrat, you will probably see more of the Democratic ones. And take note, I am not a media strategist by any means. I know how to message, I know how to talk about things, but if I was campaigning right now, which I'm not, but if I was campaigning, let's just use local candidate Ashley Ehasz, who I'm a fan of. I've had on the show and I talked about her all the time. Her message is right. Her message is amplifying that she is pro-choice, her opponent is anti-choice. However you want to frame it, however you want to talk about it, however you get that message out, that is the message. Look at the Democrats that are running in your area. Look at the Democrats that are running for state house, state senate, Congress, and senator if you don't live in Pennsylvania and it's not John Fetterman. That is the issue. That is a winning issue. They should be leaning into it, my opinion. Because now, let's take a look at this. Okay, now we have the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, being asked, hey, what do you think of this bill? What do you think of Lindsey Graham coming out with this bill and just, making it potentially harder for you to win, take the Senate back? What do you think about this? So let's take a listen here, and I'm going to mute myself.
Lindsey Graham has this 15-week abortion ban. If you take the Senate, will you put this on the floor of the Senate for a vote, or will you commit to leaving this issue entirely to the states?
Well, with regard to his bill, you'll have to ask him about it. In terms of scheduling, I think most of the members of my conference prefer that this be dealt with at the state level.
So that's a lie, but it's interesting, right? It's interesting to see that he knows, Mitch McConnell knows, that members of his caucus are in trouble if we talk about this issue, because Mitch McConnell and his caucus are pro-forced birth. They are anti-choice. They don't care, or maybe some of them do care, but they will only care when it personally affects them, about the healthcare of women, about the reproductive rights of women. They don't care. They are more used to and likely to pander to their base than care about these ridiculous abortion bans. They don't care. So as much as Mitch McConnell's saying, yeah, I'm going to leave that to the states. No, he's not. No, he's not. He might leave it to the states for now because he's not in charge of anything. He is just the minority leader.